So hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 59 of Level Up, 60 minutes of live Q&A where your questions and votes, of course, drive everything that we do. Please do use the Slido link in the chat to vote up the questions that you would most like answered, and, of course, to add some of your own as well. Level Up, well, we're live on Mondays at 8 and Fridays at 2 p.m. UK time. Live streamed to both YouTube, of course, and onto the LinkedIn platform. And you can find out a lot more about what we do by visiting our website, which is apmginternational.com. So today we're going to be talking about protection, all right? Protecting your family, yourself, your business from cybercrime. And it's actually with a group of specialists who are helping very large numbers of individuals, teams and organizations do exactly just that. So let's jump in straight away and meet our panel who are waiting for your questions. We'll welcome everybody back. Melanie Oldham, OBE, is the founder and CEO over at Bob's Business and the catalyst behind several community-driven projects, including UKC3 and the Yorkshire Cybersecurity Cluster. So welcome back, Melanie. Great to see you.
Lovely. Thanks. Nice to see you this morning, Nick, and everybody else. Really looking forward to this topic today.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Joining Melanie from Singapore is Sarbojit Bose. He's the owner and the MD over at Cyberservices. Of course, this kind of shows your bread and butter, Sarbojit. He's a strong contributor as well to the cybersecurity community in Southeast Asia. Welcome back, Sarbojit.
Thank you, Nick, and welcome Level Up team. And thank you for having me today. And surely it's my bread and butter, and I'm going to top it up with some jam today. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Zain Javed is the CTO and co-founder of Mitigate Cyber. And he's a board member, actually, of the Northwest Cybersecurity Cluster. So he's in the UK, if you're not too sure of the geography. Zain's on the left-hand side of the Pennines and Melanie's on the right-hand side of the Pennines, representing Lancashire. So we've got a balanced panel, I think it's fair to say, with both of them actually appearing on the show. So welcome, Zain. Great to see you.
Hi, Nick. Thank you, everyone. Yes, it should be a really good event today. So yeah, all industry colleagues here. So yeah, it should be fun.
All right. Okay. We won't talk about cricket, but we'll keep on cybersecurity. Okay. Very good. Mart Rovers is the trainer and, of course, president over at INTERPROM, whose business has a strong heritage in all aspects of cyber and information security and adoption of best practices and so on. Welcome back, Mart. Lovely to see you.
Thanks for having me, Nick. It's a great pleasure to be with such a distinguished panel. And just speaking with the panel, I think I have a panel buddy now. Anytime I'm on, Sarbojit is on as well. So hi, Sarbojit. Good to see you again.
Okay, all right. It's a good point, actually. Yeah, we should look at that. Yeah, you guys do tend to appear on a number of episodes together, so that's really lovely. Etienne Shardlow rejoins today. He's a senior consultant, of course, over at Symphonise Consulting in South Africa. He's working tirelessly to help organisations build and protect their digital assets. So welcome back, Etienne. Lovely to see
you. Yeah, it's good to be back. And yeah, as Mart said, a few familiar faces on the panel today. I think I'm familiar with everyone. So it's nice to be here.
All right, excellent. Now, to everybody who's watching online, thank you for joining us. Don't be shy, please. Just introduce yourselves in the chat and get those questions in so that we can put them in front of the panel. Doing that for us today is Suchitra Jacob. She's joining us from Bangalore in India. She's our question master. Welcome, Suchitra. And please, may we have our first question?
Hi, everyone. And the first question is from Peter H. What are the top 5 cybercrimes?
Okay, Sarbojit, why don't you start us off with this one?
Hi, thank you, Peter, for this question. Now, this has many aspects to it. Now, when we say top 5, so we are looking at from the organization corporate perspective or people perspective, because it impacts from both sides, or sometimes even from economic perspective in terms of the economic value. In general, we have seen that phishing attacks has been rampant over the last couple of years, whether it's Singapore or anywhere. If we look at anything in Google, we'll see phishing has gone up, and that impacts both people and the organization, because it is a people hack but data is collected to later impact the organization. So it is always that people who are the weakest link that gets bashed. So we have to be concerned about that one. And I think there will be others who want to speak and talk about more on other things.
Okay, thank you very much, Zain, and then Mart.
I'll jump in because I'm on the screen. So we've got quite a few different, obviously, items on this list, depending on who you speak to. But one of the most common one is password reuse, because simply you have lots of third-party data breaches, and the most easiest way for cyber criminals to get hold of your accounts is simply take the credentials that you have online, and you pretty much reuse this across all of the other accounts of our well-known websites on the internet. So that's why you see a lot of organizations as well as individuals and their social media accounts getting hacked because of old passwords. So don't use the same password everywhere. Always have a unique password to defend against something like that, and enable two-factor authentication.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more, I think, about that idea of, multi-factor authentication in a little while, I think. But thank you very much for starting us off. Thank you very much, Zain. Mart, and then Melanie.
Definitely phishing indeed, and the password protection, data breach, confidential information protection. I'd say number 3 would be cyber extortion, ransom attacks. Cyber criminals holding you ransom for financial purposes, typically. Definitely number 3 on my list.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's been some very high-profile ransomware, kind of attacks in the past, hasn't there? That have got into the news, and people have followed that story along, and does seem to be something which is quite prolific. Melanie, your thoughts before we hear from Etienne?
Yeah, so ransomware has been the top of the attacks for the last 3 years, and accounted for sort of 21% of threats last year. Server access being sort of the second, and that was sort of probably about 10 to 15% last year. But how do people get there? So it's that human element that was touched on. So through phishing emails, which obviously was the most common form of attack to organizations at 41% sort of last year, and then vulnerability exploitation. So how people have got into the network, which goes back to Zain's point about poor access control. So, what are people doing with poor passwords and poor user account management? So, of which, human error is still argued to be 95% of the reason. So you've kind of got what is the attack, which is your ransomware, your phishing, your server access. But how do they get there? They get there through human exploitation, which is the most common. So pulling that all together, and obviously because of COVID and us moving to more cloud services, access, transparency, and who has access is far greater. So, our attack surface is a lot larger. So that's it from my side.
Yeah, it's a really good point to make, that these behaviours generally, weaken the defence, and provide an opportunity then for exploitation. And Etienne, your final thoughts on this before we move on?
Yeah, I think all the big ones are covered, but we still face denial of service attacks. So there's still especially as businesses, as companies, we still have that issue with denial of service and hacking attacks. But the big ones have already been covered. Phishing is a big one. I'm seeing a lot of people I know whose Instagram accounts have been hacked recently. So social media accounts, identity theft, those are the big ones. So I think we've covered all the big 5 now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things from my perspective is just thinking about, kind of putting those behaviors together with the resulting, kind of criminal behavior. They're out there all of the time. These people are out there all of the time, trying to look and search for vulnerabilities in the way in which we work. And of course, human beings are creatures of habit. So, generally we have patterns in our lives. It's what makes us operate the way in which we do. We don't have to think about things. And so we build up these patterns more and more and more. And then, unscrupulous people can exploit those patterns all of the time. So excellent. Thank you very much indeed, panel. A great start to the event today. Let's move on to Suchitra, if we may, and we'll take our next question.
Question from Jim in the UK. We are a team of 20 staff and worried about cybercrime. Where do I start?
Hey, Melanie, start us off on this one, please.
Yeah, so with small teams, it's really good because before those teams expand, it's really good to have good communication so to make sure everybody's talking on the sort of the same level. So, my first point of all is get everybody together and talk about what do people perceive as the risks, both individual risks, but also team-related risks. And as I say, with a small number, it's easy to influence and change that culture and make sure that you have a really, really positive communication. So letting people know that it's okay to make mistakes, that we all sort of occasionally, in terms of email compromise, we might not always use the BCC and the CC field. So talking about that and what impact it can have on the reputation of the organisation, but try and get into a habit of being a culture where you're educating and talking about cybersecurity in every meeting possible. So making sure that it's at the heart of all discussions. So whenever you talk about them, just having it as a line item to talk about any potential risks or opportunity to talk about how to improve security, but also to talk about how individually we're accountable for the data that we process, because sometimes it's not considered as cybersecurity in their day-to-day role. So just having those really, really casual conversations that add it to a line item to every single meeting and just open up those conversations would be my sort of key pointers there.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really strong approach, actually, because I'll give you a worked example for us. We had a conversation recently about how can we invite folks outside of our organization to a Microsoft Teams meeting. And somebody was using the web version of Microsoft Teams through Office 365, and that gave them an option to hide the email addresses of participants, whereas the actual installed client version didn't offer that option. So we kind of just picked that up, and it was a casual kind of comment. Oh, no, I know how to do that. How do you do that then? Well, you go to the web client and you do it there. And then it's like, and that, little moment. And suddenly now the whole organization is able to use that instead of having to go through the pain of, sending things out in different ways. So it's a really, really strong point, to get people together and to add it into the conversations in your existing meetings. Sarbojit, your thoughts, please, and then we'll hear from Zain.
Yeah. Thank you, Melanie, for that. Yes, for him, for you 20 people, it's like an extended family. So the good thing is you can all come together and talk about all the pain points. And when people come and they agree on something, and then they want to, have more buy-in, and you have a better chance to change their behavior. So it's how we behave, and I would believe that instead of a cyber crime and using the terms like training and something awareness or not, let's talk about cyber hygiene. What we did over the last 2 years of improving our physical hygiene against coronavirus or COVID. And now let us also do that, the hygiene of practicing a better hygiene against cyber crime, so we can be safe, because it can be you and I who might be the next victim. So if all of us have a part to play, and let us all do it together. If we have that unison among us, then I think it will be a better thing, and all of your team members will be a warrior and not you alone.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Zain, then Etienne.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jim. Really, really good one. And just to expand on Melanie and Sarbojit's point there, one of the things I always suggest is start from the very beginning is, understand exactly what you're protecting. So have a look at and question what are your crown jewels. Only then you can actually defend what's important to your organization or even to individuals. And once you figure that out, you then put that into your company business objectives and make sure it's aligned. And then you can go in, look at what the guidance available. So like Sarbojit said, cyber hygiene is so important. So depending on which part of the world you're in, there's some great government advice out there. Here in the UK, we have the NCSC, the National Cybersecurity Centre. So they have like a 10-step to cybersecurity. There's also a scheme as well called Cyber Essentials, which helps you get on that cybersecurity ladder and you really look at the basics to get that right.
It's really good advice, actually, to talk to wherever you are in the world. Have a look for your national guidance. All of it is actually, it's hauntingly familiar. If you look at the different countries' national cybersecurity centre sites, they all talk about the common themes. Of course, of course they would do, and but they also provide local support, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next few minutes. Thank you very much indeed, Zain. Some great points there. Etienne, your thoughts, please, before we hear from Mart.
Yeah, I think, kind of wrapping up this question, I think we're just summarizing what people have said before. So, I like Zain's point about focusing on the right stuff. We often tend to spend a lot of time and effort trying to secure stuff that doesn't really matter to us. So focus on securing the important stuff. So identify the stuff that matters to you most. And that isn't necessarily physical stuff or access to accounts. It could be your brand and your reputation. So focus on stuff that matters most. And then, as everyone has said so far, Melanie, Sarbojit, it really is about creating a culture of security. And this is where having a small team of 20 people is so much easier. Trying to change a large corporate culture is a lot more difficult. So when you've got a small team, it's easy to build that kind of culture of security into that small team. So good luck with your journey on cybersecurity.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Etienne. Mart?
I'll keep it short and simple. There are enough free self-assessments out there. I'll recommend one later. Just to self-assess your cyber hygiene, so to speak. And those typically also tell you where your gaps are. If you're not able to answer any of these questions, as in, no, we're not doing that. Usually they focus on the bare minimum things you should be doing. So look for a self-assessment online, and typically, one that's free, where you don't have to worry about your data that is being out there. So try that, and then make that a start for your journey and see where the gaps are.
Yeah, absolutely. Melanie, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, it was just something to consider as well, because people tend to think of standards like ISO 27001 as being a bit of a beast that's an overkill for a small organisation. But we went through it when we were a really, really small team. And if I'm honest, we did it because we wanted to be seen as a secure provider and to practice what we preach. But it's so much easier to implement the policies and do that continual change programme really, really early on before the infrastructure in the organisation gets so much larger. And, it seems like a beast, but if it's just something that you pick up and just add to and then sort of get accountability and ownership from different members of the team, it sort of improves your resilience in terms of supplier management, staffing management, HR, business continuity. So if anything happened to your small business, then it could have a really, really significant detrimental effect. So there's certain things that you're thinking through that were benefits that weren't necessarily sold to me when I sort of looked at onboarding and taking part. And the other thing I would sort of say is think about elements of healthy competition. When teams are small, people are a little bit competitive in there. So think about elements of gamification. So if you looked at sort of cybersecurity escape rooms, things that allow people to bond but talk about a subject in an environment that's slightly removed from day-to-day operations where you tend to have so many distractions.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. The one thing that I would suggest, so thank you very much indeed, Melanie. One thing I would suggest for you is that you're just at that stage, aren't you? 20 people, you're starting to develop roles and responsibilities where people do different things. Okay, when you're a tiny team of 3 or 4, most people do pretty much everything. And as you grow a little bit more, then you need to think about, those roles and responsibilities. So not everybody needs access to all of the information that you hold. So that's just one thought for you to consider there. And secondly, really have a good hard look at your retirement policy around data. So how long do you retain that data for, and why do you need to retain it for that length of time? And really think about retiring some of it, because once you're beyond the transactional use of that data, it's good practice. And in fact, it's often the law in many countries now that you do not hold on to it. And the more stuff that you hold on to, and the more widely you share it amongst your team, actually the more risk that you're carrying. So just a couple of thoughts there. Does everybody need access to everything? And can you retire some of that data once you're done with it? All right, very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Suchitra, some great questions so far, and I can see lots of folks now watching us online. So thank you for joining us. If you do have a question, please do just type it into the chat and we'll pick it up and bring it straight into the panel. Next question, please, Suchitra.
Question from Rajiv. Are governments doing enough to provide the tools we need to combat cybercrime?
Zain, why don't you start us off with this, then we'll hear from Sarbojit next.
Yeah, sure. So I do think they do provide us with some great tools. So NCSC, like I mentioned before, CISA in America, they bring out some great material, threat intelligence and advice. So if you follow them on Twitter and all the social media channels, you will get the news out to you quite quickly. However, I do think that they're not marketing it enough. So you do have the social media channels, but there are lots of other guidance available that not many people are aware of. So unless you're from the security world, you know who to follow and you know who to go to for advice. But on a wider scale of things, I don't think people know about what's available to them as much as they should do. But overall, there are some fantastic materials. It's just how do we all help get it out there to the masses?
Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you very much indeed. Sarbojit, your thoughts, please, and then Melanie.
Hi, Rajiv. Very good question. Governments are doing enough or not? Now, it depends from country to country, the objective of the government and the nation. So if the nation is more on, information based, so like Singapore, we do not have any other natural resource but our people. So we rely on our people, and data information is the key. So we do have quite a strong government policy and procedure. We have government entities who do that. Now, there are other countries, other economies in the world who also have similar, like UK has, so the US and many other countries across the globe, they do have similar standards and frameworks that helps. So we can use them. I mean, if your government is not providing, you can make use of these things. And the first thing, as I said earlier, is try something to improve your hygiene. And if you do that, then I think you will be helping your people to stay safe.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I guess there's challenges all around the world with this. Etienne, what are your thoughts in terms of the provision of government leadership in not just in South Africa, but in the wider African region?
I think it needs to be a lot stronger. There is a very strong focus in South Africa at the moment on privacy. So there's lots of implementation around privacy at the moment. So that's a big focus, and it's obviously helping a lot because privacy is one aspect of cybersecurity, an aspect of information security. But I do think there needs to be a broader focus. Focusing on wider aspects of cybersecurity. So yes, privacy is a big one in South Africa at the moment, and it is something that is kind of spreading through the continent. So you'll find a lot of these trends tend to kind of spread out from Nigeria and South Africa and kind of spread through the continent that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Melanie, what are your thoughts on this?
So there's a lot happening, but it's quite a big beast, and we know that. So from obviously UK perspective, the National Cybersecurity Centre is doing a lot to try and ensure that from their own supply chains and everything that's happening in procurement to government, that people are getting as a very basic the cyber essentials and cyber essential qualifications before they can actually procure with government. But also from an outreach and communication point of view, both myself and Zain obviously represent clusters throughout the whole of the UK, and it's about how do we get and support cybersecurity companies throughout the whole of the UK and try and get messages across. And that's supported by the work that's also funded by government, which is the Business Resilience Centres. So, there's lots of work and lots of activity. And then also looking at how, cybersecurity is a relatively new profession. How are we getting that education into schools? So government investing in things like the Cyber First programme and trying to educate people so that it's actually, there as a default. So there's lots happening. There's still a lot more to do, but you've got to understand it's a relatively new industry and profession. So there's always more that can be done. But on the whole, there's lots of money being invested into these areas.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Mart, what about North America and the focus over there? Is government doing enough?
Is government doing enough? I mean, that's a really loaded question to think about, right? Is it is it enough? I mean, it can always be more. That's the problem, right? We're still chasing these criminals, so to speak. Often on the defense instead of the offense. Although things are getting better. Is it enough? Can be done more. I think the large organizations definitely tuned into what the government is recommending or what's out there, for them to benefit from. I think when you get into the smaller organizations, the awareness is often not there. Are there specific government programs to target them? Not so much. I think that more can be done in that space to raise awareness and also protect the smaller organizations. Not let alone the individuals, right? So enough? I don't think it's enough. But it's good news is that it's becoming more and more and more, and people are becoming more and more aware. People are more aware of cybersecurity or cybercrime than they have ever been in the past. So the trend is definitely there, as in the right direction. There's more to be done.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I think it's a tricky balance for government, I would say, is because on the one hand, what you're trying to do is provide, citizens with a safe place to live, a safe place to work and conduct business and so on. And at the same time, you want to be able to equip law enforcement with the ability to combat cybercrime when it actually happens. In other words, to investigate it and to hold those people to account for whatever it is that they have done. Okay, so on the criminal end of the spectrum, there's some really good work going on in the UK through the team of the City of London Police and other police forces around the country in really beginning, to focus and work and connect with these clusters in the civilian world to work together to ensure that investigations are carried out and that, the root causes of these crimes are actually surfaced and things done about them. But I think it is always a balance between the privacy of people. We don't really want, government to be overly strong in being able to look at every aspect of, of our business life or indeed our personal lives. So it's a kind of balance to be struck by, providing the right framework, if you like. Talking about frameworks, Melanie, the NCSC in the UK, this National Cyber Security Centre in the UK is maturing now and, is starting to release more and more information. What are the most recent updates that they've been providing?
Yeah, so in February of this year, they released their new cybersecurity strategy, next 5-year strategy, and in there is some really clear sort of objectives as to what they're trying to achieve in 5 pillars, looking at ecosystems. So that's part of the work that we do as clusters. So how do we strengthen it? How do we do more innovation in cybersecurity? So how do we support those cybersecurity companies that are really going to help protect us? And then looking at it from a sort of a national perspective as how do we protect our national infrastructure? How do we counter international crime? So there's lots of things. It's a really good starting block. I think if you were to look at the national cybersecurity strategy and work out, from whether it's from an individual perspective or a business perspective, which elements are closest to line to you, it's a really good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. It's certainly one of the natures, isn't it, about cybercrime, is that it is international. It doesn't respect, there's no respect of borders or anything like that. And yet it's quite interesting that the vast majority of governments around the world have taken a wholly nationalistic view. Wholly, every national cybersecurity centre around the world is a little bit different to every other one. And I would argue they have far more in common than they do in terms of differences. Okay, let's move on. Suchitra, let's take our next question, please.
Question from Peter. What is ISO IEC 27032?
Okay, I'm going to hand this off straight away. It's, I'm not one for knowing all of the numbers. So Sarbojit and then Mart.
Yeah, Peter, this is a very good question. Not many people know about it. It is about the lead cybersecurity manager from ISO standard, and because I'm one of the certified trainers, so I am aware of it. And this is also in line with the European NIS 2.0 cyber risk management. So they have something similar there. And also for NIST in US, in the NIST, they have this cybersecurity framework. So that is the implementation of that. So this is actually to help the organization to use a framework and then very methodically implement the cyber risk management, the cyber threat management, and then cyber risk resiliency, cyber risk protection, and all such things to be built up, to have the governance on that, and also the operational capabilities need to be built up there. So this is basically a certification. So organizations can have their cybersecurity lead or the leadership team be trained and certified so they can do a proper implementation. Thank you. So
Very
Mark.
much indeed. Mart?
Because the 27032 is indeed one of the documents in the 27001 series of standards from the ISO organization. And obviously this one focuses specifically on cybersecurity. It's something that complements, organizations that are already into 27001 and are looking for specific additional guidance on cybersecurity, as in, which controls should we have in place in addition to the controls that we already have in place for information security. So it targets specifically information security, network security, internet security, and protection from of the information infrastructure. So as I said, it has additional controls. And I'm thinking of controls for applications, servers, end users, controls against social engineering, and it even talks about cybersecurity readiness. So it's, as I said, it's one of the documents specifically focused all on cybersecurity. Like Sarbojit said, it's one of those that few people know about. It's definitely worthwhile if this is your priority, just to have a document that gives you all the guidance that you need to get cybersecurity going in your organization. It's an easy read. It's about 35 pages. May seem a lot, but still, it's all focused on getting you familiar with what is cybersecurity and getting cybersecurity going in your organization. So definitely worthwhile to check that one out.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, we've got a number of folks who regularly contribute actually to the development of standards around the world. So it's always worthwhile, kind of getting in touch with them if you're following that story on the evolution. The standards themselves, of course, rely on everybody, putting in some effort and joining in and sharing, their thinking, and all of that. It then ultimately gets distilled and things get updated. So thank you very much indeed, panel. Let's move on to Suchitra, please, and we'll take our next question.
We have a question from Etienne, our panelist. I recently traveled with roaming, and two-factor authentication by SMS became a problem. Does the panel have advice on 2FA apps?
Okay, all right. Zain, your thoughts. Start us off on this one.
Yeah, good question, actually, because I think we've all been in that situation before, so I think good one. So, I mean, the issue is not always rely on one form of two-factor authentication. So if you do have access to an app which generates the code, that's usually a good shout. I think more web application or software development companies are looking at sort of magic links through emails, which we know has its own problems as well. But it's the idea is that you couple bring together a few different solutions. And if I remember correctly, if you do have two-factor authentication in the setup of it, you will be provided with a backup code. So some development companies build that in so that if you do forget your device or something happens to it, you break your phone, etc., or you're traveling, then you can use that backup code. But obviously, biometrics is another good shout as well. So that's also another good way. Overall, I think more needs to be done on this particular scenario, because just recently when we were doing a penetration test, we found that Microsoft 365, which a lot of organizations use, support legacy protocols, so older protocols. So even though companies have two-factor authentication enabled, because they have the legacy protocols enabled as well, it allowed our testers to simply bypass two-factor authentication altogether and still brute force their accounts and gain access. So yeah, it's great having these technologies, but having the knowledge to configure them correctly and having that backup plan is also really important. So yeah, thanks for highlighting that.
Excellent advice. We need to retire some of these things. Don't just keep adding technology. Actually, retire some of it as well. Melanie, are you a fan of using an app rather than relying on a one-off SMS?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think I worked it out. I've sort of got 14 different 2FA accounts in my authenticator app. So it's quite a lot, but also making sure that you have them on multiple devices as well. Because I have been in the issue where I've literally gone and taken my device overseas, and then I've, for some reason or another, it's lost or misplaced. And then it's, okay, how do I get onto these accounts? So, my advice is always take a couple of pieces of kit. So thinking about taking a tablet and a mobile device and making sure that you've got, the ability, as Zain touched on, to authenticate through those devices if they're on a similar platform, or alternatively using that authenticator app. But one that I hadn't realized in a lot of the authenticator apps is the opportunity to export them. So you're not having to basically put them all in again, because that in itself is a real headache. And don't ever go down the virtual SIM route is my advice, because you can't actually physically get a virtual SIM without going into a store to get it activated. So lessons have taught me that that's a bigger headache than it needs to be. So
okay, all right, very good. Etienne, so what are your thoughts now, having lived the horror of presumably in the last 30 seconds you were waiting for that SMS and then suddenly realizing, oh drat, can't do it.
Yeah. And I was traveling without roaming activated, so I tried to activate roaming remotely, and it didn't work. So it said that it had worked, but it didn't. I didn't get any SMSs while I was away, and so I made the plan while I was overseas to install a two-factor authentication app, and for some I was able to activate it without being connected. With other solutions, there was just no way, and it frightened me that I was actually able to allow for this two-factor authentication app to authenticate me without two-factor authentication first. So I've become aware of some of the kind of gaps and some of the holes in implementing these things. But yes, I have now become a fan of an app, and I also realize the importance of having the application installed on both a laptop and maybe a phone, so that you've got a backup in case. You've always absolutely got there are other backups where you can save some authentication codes that you can use in emergencies. You can have on pieces of paper, but that comes with its own risks. So we still have to be careful.
Thank you very much indeed. Plan ahead is the right thing to do there, I guess. Sarbojit, anything else to add from your perspective?
I've got something to show you, everyone. If you can see this device. So this is a FIDO device, and this is all the experts are saying this is the way to go for the future. It is kind of passwordless. So wherever you are, you can authenticate by either from the USB-C or even it can be, from RFID. So it can be Bluetooth or something touch, and you can get your authentication done. So this doesn't need even two-factor, single factor should be good. So this is something good for travelers who are traveling and you switching between different devices. So I know the pain when your two-factor authentication you set up is not working because you're traveling or something changed. And I lost one of my phones. I mean, not lost, it's crashed. And then I had a similar problem last month. So I understand what you went through, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So I use a very similar kind of thing, an encrypted key, USB-C key, and they're very simple and straightforward. And you can add them. Obviously, they're designed. They're tiny, so they're designed to be kind of on your house keys. Like all of these things, I think the challenge is we don't set out to be in an awkward situation. It just kind of arrives, So nobody plans. Yeah, exactly. And it's only when you're in it that you're like, oh, okay, yeah. So whilst I've been kind of planning ahead a great deal, getting hold of those hardware keys and so on, which is super useful, by the way. I've also done the thing where I upgraded my phone and I traded in my old phone. So I was a good citizen. I went through, I deleted all of the information. I reset the operating system on the old phone and I sent it away, only to realize 3 days later and 3 weeks later, actually, on some of the apps, oh, drat, I should have transferred. I should have transferred the authentication beforehand. So, what a dope. And because I don't change my phone every 3 months, it just kind of happens, so you need to kind of think, So there we go. All right, very good. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Let's move on and we'll go to the next question if we can.
Question from Matt in Sydney. Password versus passphrase. Which is best to maintain security?
Okay, let's go bish bash bosh with this super fast, please, panel. Melanie first, and then Sarbojit, then Etienne.
So yeah, to me, for your primary account, something that's memorable. So if the passphrase is more memorable to you, but just make sure it's secure in the same way you'd have your password secure, so that it has a mixture of characters, letters, and numbers. But then use the password manager as my advice, and then randomly generate them all. With 200 and just shy of 300 passwords, there's no way I could have individual passphrases for everything. I'd tie myself in knots. So make sure your one, your default, your one for your access to your email, which in essence resets all the others. That has to have two-factor authentication. It has to be memorable, and it has to be something that's really secure. So a mix of a passphrase with some, that's going to be really memorable. That would be my advice.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Sarbojit?
Yes, passphrase is always better than a password. One of it is bigger, and then you can play with a lot of the alphabets and replace them with digits and characters and things like that. So I would be using Mary Had a Little Lamb, but after today, Melanie, can I use Melanie Had a Little Lamb and change some of the alphabets in there? And then I have a lot of different combinations of this little lamb that I carry with me.
I had 2.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed. And for anybody watching this after the event, all right, Sarbojit is always full of humour. So yeah, okay. Etienne and then Zain, please.
Yeah, I think we all know Sarbojit takes security far too seriously to be giving his passphrase out on YouTube. So, passphrase is always better than a password, but a password generator, password manager, even better way to go. So use a passphrase rather than a password for your primary account with your generator app, and then use a password manager. So you can have completely randomized passwords that are just almost impossible to guess.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you very much indeed. Zain, anything to add?
Yeah, so I think most of it's all covered there, but be specific on even the passphrase, because I know some organizations or individuals, they would still use "let me in," which is a really kind of a well-known password on all of the top password lists. So in a similar way, Mary Had a Little Lamb would be on one of those lists as well, because it's well-known, common quotes, common song names, lyrics, etc. They all get put into this dictionary file, and it just goes through this tool which brute forces your password. So definitely, use combinations of both, mix in with different characters, etc. If you can create completely random, so if you're as paranoid as myself, and you would just make something really generic and some really random, but use a password manager so you don't forget, it will make your life a lot easier.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's very, very difficult to, manage our modern lives. And I think looking at the panel, I'm probably one of the oldest people actually on the panel today. I would say it does actually get more tricky the older that you get. Okay, because often you end up having multiple accounts which are similar, or multiple personas. You might have a personal kind of Google profile, and you might have a business Google profile. So it's no longer the case that we have one of everything. Okay, we quite often have multiples of very similar things, if not the same thing. And managing all of that is really, really tricky. And there is real help available, so that you can use a meaningful passphrase to be able to access one of those services that generate truly randomized passwords on your behalf, which is fantastic. Really, really great. Thank you very much indeed, panel, and a really good question, Matt. So thank you for asking it. Let's move on, Suchitra, if we can. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions.
Question from Sarah in Doha. My account was hacked due to a third-party data breach. How can I stop this from happening again?
All right, well, that's a really good question, Sarah. Zain, what are your thoughts on this? How can she manage and mitigate, no pun intended, against that happening in the future?
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. I think we covered a few of the recommended advice over the course of the session today. So I'll definitely just reiterate that. Use two-factor authentication. That's a must. Password reuse, as I mentioned earlier on, is the most common way. So it feels like that's exactly what's happened to Sarah in this instance. So using multi-factor authentication, as well as signing up to those kind of websites which monitor third-party data breaches, I think it's a must nowadays. So there's a lot of apps that you can get. There's haveibeenpwned.com, which is a well-known website that you can sign up to, as various other services that we consume nowadays through banks and other businesses that we interact with. They normally provide this free of charge nowadays. So as long as you utilize that, so you're aware of these data breaches in advance, so you can change your passwords, but also I think MFA is must for that particular reason.
Very much indeed. Melanie?
Yeah, so just to reiterate, Have I Been Pwned lets you see if any of your accounts have been compromised, but look in the security settings of your main sort of email provider as well, because I know that Google and Microsoft have security facilities that allow you to go in and check your passwords, and they will tell you if your passwords are weak or if they've been compromised as well. So just go through the basic security settings that are in your email accounts, and it gives you really, really good advice. But yeah, don't reuse your passwords, and make sure you enable two-factor authentication, which will alleviate that. But just be mindful of it. And the moment that you understand that your account has been compromised, go in and change that password. That's the default recommendation. Go in and change it, and make sure that none of your other passwords are the same mixture of username and details.
Excellent. Thank you very much. One thing just to help with that, this might sound a little morbid, but it is something that's really worthwhile doing for your family. I was recently updating my will, actually, and in doing so, one of the things that the solicitors send out now are an asset register for the physical assets that you have, but also now a digital asset register, which is all about the accounts that you have online and these kinds of things. And it is really to help families and so on cope, afterwards with managing to understand what your digital presence actually was, and managing all of that. So it's a really good idea to do that and to share that in the same way that that you would be doing the information about other aspects of your life. So we'll put that web address, thank you very much, panel, into the chat for everybody who's watching online, so that you can look up yourself and see whether or not your accounts have been compromised or on these lists that have been available on the dark web and so on. So let's move on. We'll take our last question for the panel now, please, Suchitra.
Question from John. It has been said that awareness is a good first line of defense. What training or awareness programs would the panel recommend?
I think everybody's going to have some thoughts on this. Sarbojit, let's start with you, please, and then we'll hear from Melanie.
Hi, John, very, very valid question. What to start and where to start from. So as we talked about earlier, start from what pains you most. Check those assets which are your private assets or organization assets that you really matter. And then see what are the threats, and then you can find out what could be the risk, and you start with training or making people aware of that to build that cyber hygiene. Now, we do not need to bring them to a classroom and bombard them with one full day or 2 days or something of a lot of theories that doesn't stick to their mind. What happens is give them small short video clips or 15 minutes max, or maybe even lesser, 10 minutes of small interactive something, and do it on a regular basis so they can build up their cyber hygiene. And along with it, you can also have something for the senior management who needs to know why they need to be more conscious and why they need to spend more on the cyber security. And as well, train your partners and your customers what they need to do, and regarding also for your customers and other about the data privacy. So data privacy is very important, paramount, because that is something, if compromised, can make the company a lot of loss. So I think to start at these points, the cyber hygiene, the data privacy hygiene will be the good thing to go with, and then find your way. What is the next thing to move on?
Very much. Thank you, Sarbojit. Melanie, and then Zain.
Yeah, so it'd be remiss of me not to talk about obviously the products and solutions that we have at Bob's Business. But one of the things to really, really think about initially is, what are you doing in terms of assessment? Are you looking at human vulnerability assessments? Because it's such a broad topic. It's it's endless. It can go on for ages. So think about it as a bit of a journey. What are your high risk areas? What do you need to do first? So do a little bit of an assessment first to find out what your biggest risks are. Make sure that you include communication in all of that. Sajid mentioned about having micro learning. So little and often it's how we learn. Don't bombard people, and make it part of everyday learning. So making sure you're doing things little, often, and involving communication, which is what we mentioned at the start, and making sure that you're assessing that. So there's a difference between awareness and training. So you can give people the content, but how can they put that in the context of what they're doing in day-to-day operations? So having an element of simulated phishing exercises that are relatable to the communications that they receive, and being able to test that, but making sure that when you're feeding back on that learning and those testing, that you're actually doing it in a really, really positive way. Because as humans, we know that actually if you name and shame, it's not a great way of getting people on board. What you need to sort of say in your comms piece is around, 65% of you didn't click on link. That's great. How do we get the rest of us aboard? And think, what are our human nature? What is it that makes us do things? And it's about that, working in collaboration, having positive communication, and doing it little and often, because information overload would just absolutely sort of ruin your campaign. And making sure that it's really relatable, and then assessing, what have you achieved? What are you setting out to achieve? How are you going along that journey? It's a long journey, and just making a start, because the reality is that you still have 65% of organizations that aren't doing anything. that's huge. And it's the main point is doing something is better than doing nothing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Thank you very much indeed, Melanie. Zain, and then Mart.
Yeah, so really good points there already covered, but just to kind of expand on that, and again, shamelessly plugging in our services. So one of the things that I think we feel is quite important is aligning the training with your policies and procedures as well. So it's great, to go get the training programs that are out there, but you've got to really build the awareness program that is suited to your organization and to your needs. So the training program that you create needs to align with what you do, and also making sure that your employees or individuals taking that session really covers the key objectives, and you can demonstrate that in a good audit trail. And also, combine it with instructor-led training as well. So having the 5-minute videos or 10-minute courses, again, it's all great. But mix it up with maybe an hour session or half an hour session at some point in the year, and different levels as well. Getting the board involved is so important, because if the management don't have that buy-in, if you don't get the buy-in from the top, your organization's culture is going to come to a complete stop. So making sure everyone's on board, and you have a good program that's tailored to your organization.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Mart, your thoughts on this?
Just quickly, two things. One is I taught many courses at locations, customer locations, and then the class always started with somebody, taking the stage and say, "I need to say something about safety," right? Safety was a big thing for the organization, so they said something about safety. Why not mimic that and say, "All right, let's start the day with something around security," right? To continuously send that message of, hey, security is important, and this is what we can do about it. The other thing is simulation type. I was made aware once of business relationship managers actually raising cybersecurity in an organization where and this was not a hospital, where they simulated a cyber attack to the hospital. And then they had a group of top managers respond to it, and a group of, let's say, workers, so to speak, responding to it. It appeared that the workers, were responding much better than the top managers. So it was kind of an embarrassing thing, of course. Mimicking, cyber attack, patients, tweeting, "Hey, all the screens are black here." I mean, the word is out, right? Raised awareness tremendously, and of course, cybersecurity became a top priority for top management. So another way of raising awareness.
Thank you very much indeed. Etienne, final thoughts on this?
So as a training provider, I can't say no training, but I think training is important for the people who are security officers, privacy officers, people with responsibilities that for the organization's security. But everyone in the organization has a role to play in security, and that's where awareness and these less formal approaches to security awareness and security training can play a role. So a little bit of both.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. That's excellent. A couple of other thoughts just to add there. Firstly, don't forget the role of the senior leadership team in any organisation. I think it's good to demonstrate our own vulnerabilities internally, do engage with them and ask them to share what works well for them and what doesn't work so well. I think that is really, really important, so that everybody is in this together. Everybody faces these risks, and often the more senior the person in the organization, the more likely it is that they will have their account being spoofed and, shared around the company, all this kind of thing. And, requests for being paid and this kind of stuff, is starting to, become prolific in some organizations, just because senior people are more accessible and their email addresses are often available online and these kinds of things. So be aware of all of that and get them on board. Well, excellent. Well, look, thank you very much indeed, panel. It's been a really interesting, fascinating, actually, journey through the worlds of cybercrime and how do we protect ourselves and our colleagues and our families as well. So let's hear your closing remarks, if we may. Melanie, we'll come to you first, and then Sarbojit.
Yeah, so just in summary, I think we covered it, and think about what are the main risks, what are the biggest threats to you. So if you're looking at ransomware, you're looking at phishing, you're looking at password credentials backing up, make sure you're really doing the basics. Understand that it's a journey. Doing something is better than nothing. So make sure you are doing awareness, you are having these conversations as a board and as individual teams. So stick it on the agenda item, do something, and just make sure that you're aware of those risks and do the basics around patching and patch management, good password management, and communication. They're my sort of 3 focuses for you.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Sarbojit and then Mart.
Hi. Since this episode is about how to protect against, I would say password, and I would say passwords are like underwears. Do not let people see them. But change it very often, and you shouldn't share it with them.
I've got a whole new visual in my mind. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Sarbojit. It's great advice actually there. Mart and then Zain.
Just quickly, I promised earlier to make you aware of a free cybersecurity self-assessment. That's literally the link with some dashes between the words. To go there, answer 20 questions, takes you 20 minutes, and within 24 hours, you get a 25-page improvement. So it's worthwhile to see where you're at with your cybersecurity practices.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Mart. We'll have a look at that and see how that feels a little bit later on. Thank you very much indeed. Zain and then Etienne.
Yeah, it's been a really good session, actually, with great questions as well. So I would just encourage everyone to, look up all of the things that we discussed today, get involved in the community if you can, sign up to all the clusters and kind of newsletters and social media accounts of your government advice pages, because that's the only way to keep it in the know-how, because the technology is just evolving at a rapid pace. So it's always good to keep in touch with what's going on.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Etienne?
Yeah, I think cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility. So yeah, we all need to play our part, whether it's private security, whether it is business security. We all need to be aware of the threats that are out there. And I think do what you can. We can't all do everything. So as Melanie said just now, small steps. Security is a journey, and it's something that is ongoing. So there's always new threats. So it really is about taking small steps daily to keep up.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Suchitra, closing thoughts?
It's been a great show, and thank you to all the panelists and our audience for the live engagement. And like Etienne mentioned, I think it's just taking small steps daily to protect ourselves.
Excellent. I totally agree with that. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Now, for everybody who's watching online over on our website, you can now search for and view the answers to more than 800 questions on apmginternational.com/level up. An amazing free resource that connects you with 100 plus experts from all over the world. And don't forget that you can listen to the show on the audio versions on your preferred podcast platform. Now then, later on today, you can join the APMG Connect team as they took a deep dive into the NIST cybersecurity framework. That's at 3 p.m. UK time and 10 a.m. over on the East Coast of the States. We're back this Friday at 2 when we'll be talking about how to become a project manager. And then the following Monday, we take a little break for the early May public holidays around the world. And we're returning again on Friday the 6th. Of May to focus on how to become a change manager. Subscribe to the show. We'll send you a personal summary of what's coming up and how you can join us here on the panel and, of course, level up your career with APMG. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next time.